It's the 16th day, believe it or not, of July 2023. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana Durnford, and you can call in, text 709-589-4406. The lines are all open. Have a great weekend. As even possible. We are good to go. We got lots of news to get through. I'm going to start off with a story from France. Take you down that rabbit hole for a little bit. An excursion. Anyway, you can some videos for the end of the show of the boat and the truck. Some parts show up yesterday. Yeah, let's get after it. Nuclear, there's always been this big danger sign, and everybody's, no, it's like a banana, and a potato chip, walking in the sunshine. Except, that it's not, right? Let's skip the formalities. If you make it regularly here, consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification. All kinds of good stuff like that. It's going to go down the black hole anyway. It's time to gut up because that creature is coming. You know that, right? Now's the time to fight back. Fighting back will become a thing of the past soon, so don't blow the only chance you got. And away we go. As soon as I get there, and away we are. Here we are. Well, that's now the headline for that was Japan's robot arm ready to remove the fuel from reactors. First off, the second that goes near the fuel, you can never get near it again. And third off, when you read through the story, you find out it's only about getting 2.2 grams, conveniently, out of the reactor. Apparently, only 2.2 grams got out of the reactor, according to South Korea's newest version 3 weeks ago, and they're pumping it every day. This plume is the plume of Fukushima covering the planet in 468 hours, 19.5 days. A dangerous heat wave struck the globe, the planet Earth. Gee, I wonder what could cause the whole planet to go into a heat wave at the one time. Just a reminder, this is France's model of the radioactive fallout. I'll show you when it gets to 20 days. It's 10 days, or 20 days right there. Covering the entire planet. Would that cause a heat wave, Dana? Yeah. Japan's Prime Minister Kishida's cabinet support rate has slid to 34.3%. Listen, it's not his cabinet at all. He's just a local idiot they got in charge. Japan goes through prime ministers like toothpicks. The approval rating for whatever creature he is today slid to 34%, near the lowest point since he took office. Concerns over Fukushima nuclear disaster cleanup efforts. There is no efforts. The disapproval rating increased to almost 50% of the population hates his guts, which is pretty appropriate, actually. As the government prepares to discharge the treated radioactive water, 80% of the respondents said they felt the explanation provided by the government on the issue was insufficient. Only 16% said the government's explanation is enough. 16%, which is a stretch. I doubt it's 16%. A total of 87% said the release of such water, even though the government has vowed to ensure it will be carried out safely, will more or less create economic damage through groundless rumors. 87% said it would be groundless rumors, did they? 87%. See, this is why we've got to ban journalism. It's a disgusting industry. Through groundless rumors. Groundless rumors. That's actually Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, not the one they're showing you that doesn't look like that. That's the actual buildings. These were 150 feet buildings. Four of those, you're not seeing the bottom one. The bottom one looks like this. And that one is taller than either one of the buildings, the stumps that are left. That's Reactor 1 covers where they put a Kevlar sarcophagus on it. Now remember Reactor 4, look what they're doing to that one. And look what they ended up building. Anytime you're ready, Dana. So right here's the top of the building, and then you put that on it and claimed that they were getting fuel out of the fuel pool of the building. I screwed up the picture, did I? Hang on. Sometimes you can fix that, sometimes you can't. So here's different, there's just a fraction of them, but here's some of the medias from the world, big medias by the way, pretending they're in the fuel pool in that part of the building. That's what they're pretending is where they're to. This is shot in the USA because you have 70 reactors exactly like Fukushima. So remember that first part, right, this piece right here is almost the top of the stump that's left, right? So when you put this extra piece over it, you don't just magically end up with a perfect fuel pool. And so that should warn you about what the hell are they up to. So this is a plutonium-239 dispersal. Endless radioactive fallout based on TEPCO's number. We got a poll. Let's touch that before we jump into the news cycle. Was the creation of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, fatal mistake for Earth's species and humans? And we got 20 votes basically already, and it's 100%. But of course, and it's shocking. Everything about nuclear is just, how the hell did we ever get this far? Ripples of Fukushima, Hong Kong will ban more Japanese products if the radioactive water is released. So China, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea are working together to perpetrate the deception. It never stopped getting released. Never stopped being released. Oh my God. It's disturbing whenever I see them talking about if it happens when it never stopped happening. Like it never stopped happening. That's why they fake being in a building. And doesn't that concern the world? Doesn't that terrify the world? And think about all the media had to participate in that law for it to work, and all the professors in universities and the deans of the universities had to participate in the law for it to work. All the world's media, the government agencies, and the universities worldwide conspired, and there it is with your own two eyes, believe it or not, Go look it up yourself. They're pretending they're in the building to your left. Now, why would they do that? Why go through that effort? It's a question you need to ask yourself. Hong Kong will immediately ban the import of aquatic products from Fukushima, other Japanese prefectures. First off, the food was banned by 55 countries from 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. The concern stems from Japan's UN and United Nations, which is the military-industrial complex. Our assessment shows the prefectures near Fukushima have higher risk, so we're now taking a responsible way for our residents. 12 years too late, and they're not even going. This is just posturing. They're not actually going to do it. The 10 affected territories are Tokyo. It's 250 kilometers away. Why are you banning Tokyo 250 kilometers away? And Chiba's right alongside of it. Fukushima, Guma, Tochigi, Ibaraki, Miyagi, Niigata, Nagano, Nagata, Nagano, and Satamiya, whatever the hell that is nuclear wastelands. We've covered it many, many times over the last 12 years. Last week, the UN Nuclear Agency endorsed the plan without even getting their own samples. They made 4 trips during the last 12 years, Dana. Yeah, no, I hear you. Wow. In Hong Kong, the import of certain products like fruits and vegetables from Fukushima is currently banned, unless you got a certificate of radiation checks from the scumbag Japan, from degenerate Japan. Other products like meat and poultry from there are allowed in if they come with a radiation certificate. Radiation certificate from Japan. You'd be pretty freaking stupid to believe that. Just enough to poison everybody in Hong Kong, of course. And import of many food products from the farms from 4 other Japanese prefectures south of the Fukushima, Guma, Ibaraki, Tochigi, and Chiba, which is right by Tokyo, will also have to be accompanied with radiation certificates. In other words, there is no certificate. How come you're not doing your own certificate? You disgusting parasites. Japan used subsidies to buy silence. This was a cartoon, and that's all it was. Take the money and shut up. Are you sure the wastewater is safe? So this is China's major media. So the idea is to manipulate the population. So you need dissent, but it has to be controlled dissent. Hence Taiwan, China, South Korea, see? Yeah, we're going to take it, but you better give us a certificate, prove that it's safe. Welcome to the New World Order. EU removes post-Fukushima curbs on Japan's food imports. What a mistake it was creating the EU. What an absurd betrayal it has been ever since its existence. And you know me, when I see pictures, I'm a bit weird. Zoom in. So that to your left is Reactor 1, what's left of it. And they took that down friggin' 6 years ago or something, so it's a pretty old picture. And you can see to your far right there, that's Reactor 3. And look at the height of it compared to the other buildings. But that's the cover they were building over it. It doesn't physically touch it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see Reactor 3. Because Reactor 3 looked like that, see? It's completely gone like Reactor 4. The EU has required pre-export testing of food products for radioactivity since 2021. They're so evil they don't even hide it anymore. I think they take great pleasure in it from what we've seen over these last 12 years. It's required certificates showing levels of radioactive isotopes in wild mushrooms. Certificates. You better send us a certificate. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Some fish species, not all of them, but some of them, and edible wild plants like bamboo shoots from Fukushima and 9 other prefectures. The European Commission has said these restrictions have been fully lifted. Canada, Dana, what are you talking about? Canada had done it 93 days to shut your mouth. Well, that's true. Canada was captured by the nuclear industry immediately. As soon as nuclear was created, Canada got captured and then surrendered. We surrendered quicker than the French do, for God's sakes. Canada haven't got a single media or journalist or a professor on the entire country that is known worldwide. Not a single one. Because they're scum, right? This move will help drive forward the reconstructions of the devastated area, said the demons. Hungary nuclear plant cuts output because of warm Danube waters. I think that's a bit of an understatement. When the water's 100 degrees, I'm waiting for France to come, because you know what's happening in France, right? Last year, France was shutting down reactors left, right, and center. Well, you know, they were public about it. This year, they're just keeping silent, I guess. We got a heat wave down here, bro. Wow. Sheesh. It's really something. We're out in the Atlantic. We have a total failure of the bird colonies here. Total failure of the insects. The pollinators. Still haven't... Well, I seen one bee. That was 2 weeks ago or something like that. It was pretty, too. I crouched down so I wouldn't disturb him. It might be the last one in the province. So an excavator works near the Hungary's Paks nuclear plant. They're going to give that an extension, by the way, to prepare the new construction site for a new reactor. But they haven't got enough water to run this reactor because the rivers are too low and it's too warm. So why are you building another reactor for? They did not specify when the power could be restored to nominal levels. Yeah, well in the winter, when the temperature comes down again, see? Excuse me. France detonated nearly 200 nuclear tests in French Polynesian islands. And now an activist is calling for an accountability. And scumbags beyond nuclear and everybody's got their dirty little paws into that kettle, right? When France tested its last nuclear bomb in 1996 in the French Polynesia, it was detonated deep underground in a deep shaft drilled into volcanic rock. Everything that was detonated underground split the earth open and vented it into the environment. Everything. There's not a single one that didn't. He said it sent a white shock wave into the air. A shock wave. It's a radioactive plume. Visible on grainy television cameras at the time. A white sports coat. By the time France finished its testing programs on the atolls, around 190 nuclear tests had been conducted. Nuclear explosions have been conducted in lagoons, dropped from planes, suspended from helium balloons. After international pressure, testing moved underground. Think about that. Helium balloons, if you use enough helium, you can lift a nuclear weapon. It's crazy. The largest detonation that they admit to was Canopus, which was a two-stage thermonuclear tritium-laced test that exploded in 1968 while suspended from a balloon. It was 200 times more powerful than the Nagasaki bomb. 200 times. Now they say on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so they could be saying 200 times for each one, which is 400 times more powerful than the Nagasaki. Because you got to be careful with these creeps. These are creeps, right, in the industry. So that's 200 nuclear bombs. If you go look up the Nagasaki, Hiroshima bombs, then multiply it by 200. Right? It's still 200 nuclear bombs is a nuclear war. That's a nuclear war. If Russia and NATO fires 100 Nagasaki 15 kiloton bombs at each other, is that a nuclear war or not? You need to ask yourself that question if you're on a fence, because you shouldn't be on a fence when you put that equation into the conversation. Combined effects of the testing was equivalent to Hiroshima-sized nuclear bombs exploding into French Polynesia every week for 14 years. So imagine a nuclear bomb going off every week for 14 years, and the official story after is nobody ever got sick from that 14-year nuclear war. That's a 14-year nuclear war. That's 14 years of a nuclear war. If Russia and Ukraine fires a nuclear weapon every week, is that a nuclear war? If you do it every week for 14 years, is that a nuclear war? When just because it's not done in anger, it's the same bomb, the same radioactive fallout. Total of the nuclear testing on planet Earth is equal to around 36,000 Nagasaki bombs. 36,000 worth of radioactive fallout. This is why we see the decline of all the species. This is why we see mass cancer and diabetes and Down syndrome, schizophrenia and Alzheimer's, dementia and autism. This is why we see so much heart problems and liver problems and lung, these epidemic levels, because it's finally caught up to us. You got to realize there's 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging plumes every day, 1,000 plumes every day. And because these fuel pools are still splitting atoms. It's an industry that is sick. The people in it are just disconnected from any human responsibilities whatsoever. The combined effects of France's nuclear testing, aka nuclear war, was equivalent to a Nagasaki-sized plutonium nuclear bomb exploding in the French Polynesia Islands every week for 14 years. Every week for 14 years. Every week. Today our ocean is totally contaminated. It's like a poison. There's an understatement and a half. You can't find a family without cancer. Just gives you the shivers thinking about it. You can't find a family without cancer. Or heart problems, or liver problems, or lung problems. And today you can't find a family basically without dementia or Alzheimer's or autism. And if you haven't got it now, it's coming. People down here are getting dementia and Alzheimer's at 45 and 50 years of age. Because you used to eat a lot of shellfish, right? And you only need to do it once. Hina herself was diagnosed with leukemia at 24. Her grandmother, her mother, her aunt, and her sister all had thyroid cancers. And thyroid cancer is just one of hundreds of cancers and one of 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll manifest from the nuclear plague. Everybody in her family got thyroid cancer. Total coincidence that they blew up a nuclear weapon every week for 14 years, right? French nuclear tests exposed the entire French Polynesian population to radiation. You know, like a nuclear test every week, Dana, is not the same as a nuclear war. Dana. Yeah, but the radioactive fallout is, moron. 14 years with a nuclear detonation every week. And the French government, what's it? I can't remember how many administrations. There was 20-something administrations. All refused to acknowledge that the French Polynesians might need some medical help. No, nothing happened to you. You're okay. It's in your head. You got radiophobia. Yeah, but you set off a nuclear weapon, the equivalent of it, every week for 14 years, and in our little area, and we didn't do nothing to you. Yeah, but that's why we call you guinea pigs. Guinea pigs. The study found a shocking number of people, mostly concentrated in the French Polynesians, was directly affected by nuclear fallout. Turns out almost all the population of the French Polynesian were exposed to radioactive air. It was 14 years of radioactive air. Based on declassified French documents and other records, showed the real impact of radiation was 10 times higher than what the official report. 10 times higher. I'm pretty sure that's an understatement. Researchers claim this was owing to the CEA failing to take official considered contamination that took place through drinking water. They refused to acknowledge that people might have consumed radiation in their drinking water. They're not evil at all. They're so past that. They're so far out behind that. That's not even in the back mirror anymore. Evil got nothing on these people. Failing to take officially consider contamination that took place. Yeah, we hear this all the time. We cover this all the time. Becoming an anti-nuclear activist, she started her posting articles and links online and eventually addressed the United Nations. Oh, I hope she took a whole lot of showers right after. That's got to be pretty gross. She said, I really think that using the term test totally minimizes the consequences. Beyond nuclear is in there like a dirty sock, eh? It's probably pointless to try to do an interview with her or talk to her because Beyond Nuclear got her wrecked. Propaganda by now. Worldwide total nuclear test was 540,849 kilotons. Peaceful explosion, of course. So this was a shocking amount. The atomic bomb of Hiroshima was the little boy bomb, was 15 kilotons. So if you look at France's nuclear of 13,567 kilotons, that's 904 Nagasaki bombs they set off in the French Polynesian and Niger. One of them was equal to 200 of these going off at the one time. This is Nagasaki, I think. It was equal to 200 of these at the same time. Cancer epidemic is what I should say. Type 2 diabetes, obesity, breast cancer. So it's not just thyroid cancer. You got type 2. I'm going to show you a bunch of diseases because we talk about it. So typically when I talk about some of the 1800 diseases, I'll just rattle off heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. So 18, right? 18, but there's obesity, breast cancer. There's also type 2 diabetes. Tumor tissue banks. Disposition record of plutonium released from Nagasaki in the reservoirs of Nagasaki, where they rebuilt the city on bomb craters. Arthritis and gout, a prevalent and incident study, because they're suggesting, right, that gout and arthritis is also caused by radioactive fallout. Achilles tendon reflex issues is also caused by radiation. Cancer in Japan, Japanese exposed as children to the atomic bomb. Why are you doing studies on that? Childhood cancer in relation to prenatal exposure to atomic bomb radiation. Right brundle branch block, which is your heart, without overt heart disease, predicts higher risk of a pacemaker implantation. The studies of atomic bomb. So it wrecks your arteries. And think about this, apply this to the species too, not just humans. Residual radiation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Residual radiation. There's an understatement. Global transport. Let me just adjust that screen because let me move that in just a bit closer. So you can see all the hairs in my bald head. Now that's because I pulled them out. I didn't go bald naturally. I pulled most of my hair out myself. Global transport of plutonium, which is named after the devil appropriately, from Nagasaki to the Arctic. And you know that first bird I showed on the last show was sitting on the green watch buoy and the harbor buoy when we started going through all those pictures on the last show in the second half? That was an Arctic tern. They usually travel in huge migratory flocks. So officially, after 14 or 15 days on the ocean researching, we found a migratory bird. There's hope for the species yet, Dana. Unfortunately, there's not. As far as I know, one bird can't reproduce by itself. Systematic collection of tissue, I can't even pronounce that tonight. I think a few ha-has is appropriate about now. Tissue specimens, solid cancers among the learning disabilities in individuals exposed prenatal to ionizing radiation. Dementia among atomic bomb survivors. I can't even remember what that one's about. Oh, that's tumors. First, normally you think of leukemia. The savages signing their name onto it. They're going to blow up women and children so the government will give up the war, right? What would he say if Japan came over and attacked the women and children in America, I wonder? Trends in the prevalence of diabetes among Hiroshima survivors. Comparisons of accumulated doses in quartz and feldspars extracts from atomic bomb exposed roof tiles uses several methods. And what they were talking about was the people who were repairing the roofs were getting exceptional doses from radiation because it is embedded in everything. Unilateral, multiple primary tumors in atomic bomb survivors. But with plutonium, it's usually 3 tumors: liver, the lung, and the bones. And the bone is usually the first one to kill you. There's so many diseases from radiation, I can't possibly keep track of it. Radiation effects and cognitive functions among atomic bomb survivors exposed. So not just the children born after, it's the survivors. Incidences of leukemia in survivors of Hiroshima. But France blew up 904 Hiroshimas, Nagasaki's, and nobody got sick. How convenient. More cancers from different types of cancers. Small head size after in utero exposures to atomic radiation. Chromosome aberration frequency in cultured blood cells relationship to radiation dose of A-bomb survivors. We're almost through this, another 50 minutes or something, just kidding. The effects of neutrons in Hiroshima, implications of the risk estimates, increased cell mutant frequencies in atomic survivors, spontaneous immortalizations of cultured cells, fibroblast obtained from a high-dose atomic bomb survivor. High-dose atomic bomb survivor. Does radiation cause liver cancers? But of course, sure. Comparisons of radiation effects in atomic bomb survivors and other populations. Plutonium mass balance release from Nagasaki A-bomb and applicability for future environmental research. Risk of cancer among the children exposed in utero to A-bombs radiation, 1950 to 1984. Breast cancer risk among the survivors of atomic bomb patients exposed to therapeutic. There's a big lawsuit, by the way, for breast cancers. The industry chopped off around 10 million women's breasts that didn't even have cancer. Rays as weapon, gamma rays, neutrons, betas, X-rays are 100% permanent, million-year weapons. They last for millions of years. Stomach cancers in A-bomb survivors. Leukemia and thyroid. Breast cancers. Genetic study mutations in the children of atomic bomb survivors. High incidences of cancers in survivors. Skin cancers among 83 accelerations of aging associated increased inflammatory markers, attenuations of the immune system among atomic bomb survivors. I got 5 more to get through. Early onset breast cancer, atomic bomb radiation, cardiacs, radiation, not the flash, because that happened too, but from radiation. Radiation as a weapon of mass destruction. Yeah, that's pretty appropriate, isn't it? And by the way, the entire arsenal of these are up at the nuclearproctologist.org. Go, if you go to my page, you'll find the news. From at the top of the page, front page you get there, you'll see news from the nuclearproctologist.org. Just scroll down that and you see Nagasaki. There's probably around 200 of these. You should download them and email them out to your pro-nuclear communities. So the list of the nuclear weapons from France was equal to 904 Hiroshima and Nagasaki sized nuclear bombs. But yet, according to a heartless, soulless, spineless, cowardly French, which is appropriate really, nobody, and I mean nobody, got sick. The official story is. That's right, Richard. They detected neutron beams in Tokyo as the reactors melted multiple times, folks, over an extended period. And when you look at the 904, don't forget all the sixes. Because that's the official number that, when you do the equation, 13,567 kilotons divided by 15, which is how many kilotons was in the Hiroshima, equals 904 Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, and 0.4666666666666. And that's only 2.5% of all the nuclear testing worldwide, which works out to 36,000 Nagasaki bombs. Because Hiroshima was the only uranium bomb. Everything else was a plutonium bomb. Was the creation of the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the IAEA, which is a subsidy of UN, a fatal mistake for Earth's species and humans? Well, it was 100%, and we appreciate the votes, but it's 100% a fatal mistake. Their job is to cover up everything, and that's all they do. They don't do nothing else. That's their job, is to cover up and demonize anybody UN doesn't like. And dispositional records of plutonium and cesium from Nagasaki in the reservoirs of Nagasaki where they rebuilt the cities. So there's all kinds of diseases like obesity, diabetes, breast cancer, gout, arthritis. There's endless cancers for the children. And worldwide, currently, we have around 15,000 megatons, which is equal to 1 million Nagasaki, Hiroshima-sized bombs are currently on the planet. Such a stupid, disgusting industry. That's an actual test. That's the thermonuclear bomb, actually. That equal to 200 Nagasaki's. And the French have vehemently refused to acknowledge any adverse side effects whatsoever, with malice, with contempt. With unbelievable contempt. Compensation for an unholy, ungodly, sinful, foul. Fukushima water discharge is a big problem, says the player, which is China. And China is playing the good guy, and Taiwan is playing the good guy, and bad guy at the same time, and South Korea. And South Korea just wants everybody to shut up. So they're holding press meetings every day till everybody shuts up. That's their version. That's what they said, right? It reveals that the discharged nuclear contaminated water in the sea is a real and big problem. Like, I'm astounded that we're having this conversation. I could never have guessed we would be talking about it in this context. La 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 la. La 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 la. Let's just entertain that for a few minutes. How about that? Who's with me? Too late. Let's talk about the ocean for a few seconds. Or more. Japan Times. You know, Japan Times. One says this never happened today. Current administration, like, no, it never happened. But the 2013 administration in Japan said fears marine life is being poisoned by nuclear material flowing from Fukushima. Experts, which no longer exist apparently, warn of festering radioactive sore contaminating the food chain. U.S. starting in 2015 study, impact strength of cesium-137 on the west coast to be as high as 4%. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Fukushima highly radioactive water is flowing. The Times, lethal threat from Fukushima highly radioactive water flowing into the Pacific Ocean. 2013. A threat to life. Today, the official story is nothing got out. 2.2 grams is all it got out. But don't worry, that's in 1,000 tanks. They're going to take their time and dump it over 30 years because, you know, it's 2.2 grams of tritium, Dana. I've never seen a plume of tritium in all these years. Fukushima Daiichi has contaminated the biggest body of water on the entire planet. And if the radioactive leaks to harm marine and human life, the whole Pacific Ocean likely to have cesium levels 5 to 10 times higher than the peak of the nuclear bomb war that they call testing for some reason. ABC, which is just disgusting, despicable Australia. Authorities on the U.S. West Coast concerned with stunning news from Fukushima that the radioactive water is pouring out every day. Da, 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 da. This is a 20-day model of the airborne. The last thing I'm worried about is the water, but let's talk about it anyway. This is 20 days of radioactive fallout. It's a continuous plume covering almost over half the planet. Do you really think it stops? Turns to fairy dust the next day? Radioactive water reached 3,200 kilometers east of Fukushima 6 months ago in 2012. Yeah, but don't worry, because the plume covered the planet in 20 days. Up to 93 billion becquerels a day are still leaking into the Pacific from Fukushima, Japan expert. Well, 93 billion, there's 37 billion. I'll explain this to you. Because it's worded, so it takes a second. I've heard so many of these straw man arguments over the years. And eventually we got a rebuttal for just about everything. Primed and ready to packaged, kind of, and ready to go. Because you got to be consistent to get the population. There's such a scumbag industry. Here we go. So cesium-137 has around 88 curies per gram. So a curie is 37 billion becquerels. So cesium has 88 times 37 billion atomic decays every second, and that's for over 300 years. But the reactors don't run on cesium. So 93 billion becquerels is equal to 3/88 of a curie. I'm sorry, which is a gram. Let me go back to that one for you one more time. So a gram is 88 curies. And each curie is 37 billion atomic decays a second, pulsing energy at the speed of light. This is a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's not, when you talk about the actual, what happened, it's very dishonest to suggest that that's all that's getting out of the buildings that don't exist any longer, right? So let's put it in another perspective, though. So multiply 88 by 30. Now, strontium has 120 curies per gram. And for every cesium-137 produced, by the way, there's 100 times more strontium-90. And strontium-90 didn't peak until the first 1,000 days, almost 3 years. And it stays peaking for tens of thousands of days. Okay, so potassium-40, which they like to use to manipulate you, 0.000071 curies per gram, or it's 71 10 millionths of a curie per gram. 71 10 millionths. Versus cesium is 88 curies times 37 billion antipagetic man-made isotopes per gram. And strontium-90 is not 120, Dana. It's 140. Get your shit right, Dana. I'm sorry. It was a hot day. I was under the truck, working on the boat. I got videos to prove it at the end of the show. I can make mistakes too sometimes, but I'm usually not allowed. Me make the mistake is a big deal. The industry will chop it up, stitch it together, come out and say, he's stupid, listen to this. No Freudian slips allowed. I'll usually correct myself. I noticed that over the years, right somewhere within a few minutes of a mistake. And it's not a mistake, it's just, I've been at this for so long, you're going to have these Freudian slips. But it is important, 140 curies per 37 billion. Would you like to see that on a calculator? I know I would. Raise your hands if you're human and say, me too. So 140 big ones times 37 billion. 37 billion. Too much, Dana. Too many zeros, Dana. Smarten up. What did I get done there? One less, Dana. So 37 billion equals 5,180 billion isotopes floating around looking to poison something with replicating cells. And so when you think about, there's two Danas, don't let that bother you. It's too hot. I got to have one of my top buttons undone. Don't worry, all my chest hairs are gray. So I'm not trying to be cool, because that's not even possible. So 5,180 billion atoms released into the environment per gram, and there's around 10 million pounds in each building. Well, there was. Fukushima ocean plume hit Canada 6 months ago, 2013. IAEA experts predict a radioactive season will occur across the Pacific to the west coast of Canada in 1 to 2 years, give or take a couple of decades. The current generation, like nothing got out. The bottom plume over there is 27 days. Covering the entire planet. This is just Reactor 3, right? When you see these double pictures, typically I stitch them together. That's why they look so stupid. Highest levels of Fukushima contamination and plankton are already east of Hawaii. That's Japanese media. I flagged around 50 of Craig's comments yesterday and his site. I flagged his site. I put a complaint in about his site. I bet you 100 times over the years. A piece of shit. What a disgusting sack of shit he turned out to be. La 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 la. Hang on, I'm getting there. Boom chugga lugga lugga. Oh, here's one. Let's use this study. I wasn't supposed to be here. How did we end up here again? Oh, yeah. Fukushima. This is a plume model from France. 1 million times normal. There is no normal. There's leftover from the nuclear war. That's some reason people call testing. This is 9 days of radioactive fallout, according to the scumbag French, who says nothing escaped their nuclear bombs. Everything went back into the bottle with the genie. Cesium-137 levels increased 1 million to 10 million times after Fukushima. This is the 18th. I'm sorry. Yeah, the 18th of March 2011. This is 7 days after the tsunami, 2 days after the last explosion. And the updated version of that, it covers the planet, is this model right here. This one is based on 16 days from France, which is the same people made the model I just showed you. This is 16 days. So you have an invisible plume covers the entire planet, pulsing energy every second at the speed of light. Almost the speed of light. Do a calculation of how much energy, how much gasoline you need to make a car go the speed of light. Let's keep it rolling here. Fukushima radioactive plume will continue, because it's already happening in 2013, to hit the shores of U.S. and Canada for decades. No, it'll never stop. It never stops. What, you really think it's going to change in a couple of decades? It's impossible to remove the molten core for hundreds of years, if ever, and the flow of the contamination from the plant will be virtually impossible to stop. That's RT, the Russians. After we left Japan, the sailor said it felt as if the ocean itself was dead, 2013. Nothing alive for over 3,000 miles. No longer, and these are $1 million sail race boats. They've been doing this for over a decade, this captain. And he couldn't believe there was nothing left in the ocean. Nothing alive. No longer saw turtles, dolphins, sharks, or birds. He saw one whale that appeared helpless with a big tumor on his head. And this came out of Australia. San Francisco Chronicle. Fukushima radiation possible culprit, and huge starfish die off from Mexico to Alaska. No, Dana, nothing got out. Just a tritium, it's all in the tanks. From Mexico to Alaska. Potential catastrophe, extremely virulent, going up and down the coast. Now, I was on the ocean doing research expeditions when there were still some starfish left, and they disappeared within the first 2 years. Physicians, interesting fact for the West Coast in a new UN report. A new UN report. So 95% of Fukushima discharges transported in the Pacific. Contamination impact North America with uncertain consequences for public health. Concern over recent releases, they're changing in character. So UN, I got lots of evidence of UN admitting that Fukushima lost its inventory, but this current administration is saying nothing got out. Water with nuclear fuel coming up from the ocean floor off Fukushima, because some of the assemblies actually landed in the ocean. They cemented that whole harbor to the floor. Tokyo professor, 156 quadrillion becquerels of cesium-137 in the basements, doubled Chernobyl, getting close to the total fallout from every atomic bomb test in history. Maybe outputting from seeps in seafloor, I don't know. So they're saying, just the only time it's cesium, remember there's 1,000 other fission products, but they're saying the amount coming out of a single site from meltdowns, reactor melts. You can't call them meltdowns anymore. You got to call them reactor melts, which is what we named the video, Fukushima reactor melt. Try to confuse the censorship machine, right? Because that's what they're using in official languages now. Fukushima reactor melt. Not melt through, not melt down, not nuclear. Fukushima reactor melt. They'll figure it out. Getting close to total fallout from every atomic bomb in history, which is equal to 36,000 plus Nagasaki bombs going off. That's the equivalent in kilotons, right? La, 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 la. All-time high radiation levels in the wells at Fukushima plant, 40 meters from the Pacific, 1.1 billion per cubic meter of strontium-90 and other beta emitters, feared highly contaminated water leaking into the ground and being allowed to flow. That's the Japanese media. Global health impact of Fukushima disaster calculated by Stanford researchers. So you got all this evidence saying it happened. You got pictures and documentations building destroyed. Put 3 weeks ago, nothing got out. Only 2.2 grams. Don't worry, it's all in the tanks. And they're going to release it in increments over 30 years. Cesium in the sea likely to return to Japan in 20 to 30 years, Kyoto, who currently says it never happened. We absolutely did not say that, Dana. Big problem. Cracked floor in Fukushima reactors are leaking into the groundwater that's rising, which is liquefaction, due to TEPCO's stupid, idiotic ice wall. Why not build a real one if you're going to do that at all? Can no longer be stopped from getting in the ocean, because like a wall doesn't have a floor or a roof, so it ends up in the ocean. Worse than that, buildings now on mushy lands, which is liquefaction. Fukushima plume hit Canada 6 months ago, preceded model predictions by several years. Human health is the first reason listed for the study. Exactly how much evidence do the world need before they make a stand? I'll get it. I'll get it. I'll find it. Whatever you want, I'll get it. This is NOAA's model. They showed you the tsunami model, right? They mocked you when you believed it. Highest concentration levels yet in the seawater off Fukushima plant. And look, they're talking about tritium. They also talk about cesium, right? Next to nothing. But when you look at the real numbers, you know that's a scumbag. 93 billion becquerels a day, we covered that one. Twice as much contaminated water entering the ocean Fukushima as the officials claim, 600 tons a day, according to the New York Times. Fukushima contamination in the ocean reached Alaska in under 6 months, or in under a month. Under a month. Well, the corrosive current's quite quick. Unfortunately, that didn't matter because the airborne plume covered the planet in about 16 days, according to the French model. And all the oceans, all the drinking water was covered, all the communities, all the schools, all the playgrounds, all the malls, all your vehicles, all your pets, all your children, all your vulnerable elderly, the backbone of your communities. Japan Times, discharges of Fukushima nuclear material into the Pacific have effectively contaminated the sea. Japan Times, folks. Walls are cracked below the ground as if the damage above isn't bad enough. When you see these airborne models, this is Xenon. The top left-hand one is based on 20 days. Kyoto, which is the Japanese media, huge amounts of radioactive tritium may have entered the ocean. Up to 40 trillion becquerels, claimed TEPCO. TEPCO doesn't include before May 2011. Like, it's very rare. This is some of the rare incidences where they actually mention tritium. I think we have maybe 10 examples of that. It's usually because reactors run on uranium, plutonium. New breaches at Fukushima flowing into the Pacific. Currents. Well, it's because it's so much airborne. We're almost through this. We'll get back to the news here in a second. Radioactive iodine is 7.5 million times legal limits in water around Fukushima. 7.5 million times. Cesium at 1.1 million times. But officially, nothing got out. It's pretty convenient for nuclear industry. U.S. West Coast to be hard hit by Fukushima ocean contamination. The North Pacific Gyre is transporting radioactive material to America. Well, it covers the whole planet in about 16 days. 15 quadrillion becquerels of radioactive substances suspected in the trench. The TEPCO emits is leaking into the groundwater. Every time I hear the word leak, I just want to strangle robot. Study shows Fukushima nuclear pollution becomes more concentrated as it approaches the U.S. But no worry, nothing got out, Dana. It's all in the tanks. It was only 2.2 grams. Sobering results. Ocean currents keeping radiation from being diluted. Highest cesium values not necessarily closest to Fukushima. Radiation Fukushima groundwater skyrocketed 3,500 times above their disgusting numbers. 5 meters from the Pacific. Nothing being done to stop it flowing into the sea. The sea, oh, the sea, that wonderful. This is ocean plume, but it wasn't a very accurate one. This is a better one by the German. Okay, I think we're through. 2 more to go or something. 3 more to go. 40 meters from the sea, 1.1 billion becquerels a cubic meter of strontium-90. It's not just going to be strontium-90, but just strontium-90 because you can find it. It's an environmental disaster, Washington Post. Radiation levels in the ocean hundreds of times above normal. Countries around the Pacific worried about ongoing Fukushima leak. How anybody can call it a leak and not be sentenced to life in jail is very disappointing. So even originally when the reactors detonated, you can't call that a leak. If you owned those buildings and your manager sent you these pictures and said, don't worry, it's only a little leak, then you would fire them, right? In the history, this is the last one, in the history of science, we've never seen anything like the Fukushima plume heading across the Pacific to US and Canada. Why is Japan allowed to get away with contaminating the ocean? That's a great question, actually. Zaporizhzhia nuclear disease factory is a dirty bomb. It's just waiting to go off. Well, the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. And from this side, where they took the picture, right behind them is farms as far as you can see, which is the norm, right? How quickly a meltdown could happen. The fuel inside of nuclear reactors need continuous active cooling for months after the reactor shut down because of the heat being produced, which is the atoms are still splitting, and they will for millions of years, and that's the issue, right? But they don't tell you that. They just say there's an issue, you got nowhere to put waste. But what's the problem with waste? Well, you know, it's hot. What do you mean it's hot? That's as far as they're going to go. They're not going to say, well, it's still splitting atoms. Because then you're going to say, where are the atoms going? And they're going to say, well, we can't contain it. It's an invisible plume from every reactor. Billing, each billing has 2 pools. There's roughly, because you got all the universities, you got all the militaries, you got all the legacy, there's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide splitting atoms directly into the environment because you can't contain this stuff. It should make you sick to your guts, that statement. Because the heat that continues to be produced by the decay of hundreds of different fission products, the longer, hundreds is more like 1,000, the longer the fuel is inside the nuclear reactor, the more radioactive it becomes. Yay! That is why when fuel is removed from a reactor, still requires continuous active cooling for decades. More than 70% of the total radioactivity of Fukushima power plant was in the spent fuel pools. You know, the ones that were at the top of the buildings that don't exist anymore. But yet they came out pretending that they did. They pretended they were in the buildings. The world media ran out and said, the stoic nuclear is getting the fuel out of the pool, the most dangerous job in human history. If the fuel rods touch each other, boom, it's all gone. Humanity will be threatened for thousands of years. In his classic 1981 book, Nuclear Radiation and Warfare, Nobel Peace Prize winning physicist Joseph Roblat documented how in a pressurized water reactor, the meltdown of the core could occur within 1 minute or less after the loss of cooling, in less than 1 minute. That's such an important statement, isn't it? In less than 1 minute, it can melt down. I gotta put that in my pile. Oh shit, they screwed up that, didn't they? Bear with me. Okay, that's done. Well, I mean, you know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Russia says the West is sponsoring nuclear terrorism after Ukraine drone strike. Of course, Ukraine captured, Russia captured Ukraine's plant, set up nuclear weapons, had firefights there, they had wars right alongside of it, they lost power to it. I don't know how many times, actually lost track. And these are not things you normally would lose track, but it happens so much. Russia accused the West on Friday of sponsoring nuclear terrorism. Just having nuclear power is terrorism. They're hemorrhaging radiation in your community, in your environment, in your ecosystem, in your water, and you don't got nowhere else to go on the planet. There's no other planets to go to. And you shouldn't have to leave this one. You wouldn't if you didn't have nuclear. If you didn't have nuclear, this would be paradise. The reason we have no species left is because we have 80 years of complacency with the population. They've been lulled in by well-organized, like Greenpeace's job is to be the controlled opposition. They're designed to replace people like me, for instance, right? So they'll get interviewed rather than someone like me, because someone like me gets interviewed, get on the mainstream media, it's all over. The governor of Russia's Kursk region, which borders Ukraine, said the Ukrainian drone had struck a residential apartment building, a Soviet-era disease factory on the banks of a cooling pond for the Kursk nuclear power station, which is still in service. On the banks of a cooling pond, because they do their cooling pond outdoors into the environment. Demons, man. The incident, which comes after Russia said it was destroyed 2 Ukraine drones near the Kremlin in May, drew furious reactions from the Russian Foreign Ministry, given the drone's proximity to a nuclear disease factory. Well, we're starting up wars on planet Earth, and you won't have that issue, scumbags. Associated Press gets a rare look at the Japanese Fukushima nuclear plant. It's a rare look. A rare look. Such a weird statement, eh? It gets a rare look. Yeah, well, I'm surprised there's anything left to look at. Like, it blew up. Did anybody bother mentioning that to these people? So this is how the cover story works. They built this structure. This is a part of it, offsite, brought it in assembly. That's the stump of Reactor 4. They've done the same thing to Reactor 3. But when you look at how big these buildings actually are, this was a structure for Reactor 1. That's 3/4 of it. The rest of it is this piece right here. You can't see this piece in that picture. And that piece is way bigger than that or that. Right, so that piece is bigger than them, and the fuel pools are at the top of the building. And guess what? The top of the building, which is up there, doesn't exist anymore. They're hoodwinking you. And because everybody remains silent, then they have no worries. Mary Yamaguchi. Surprise, surprise, surprise. AP gets a rare look at Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant as it prepares to release the radioactive water. Mary Yamaguchi. And this is supposed to be the water dumping system in Fukushima, which is an abandoned town, by the way. And let me go backwards for 1 second. So Mari Yamaguchi, she's used in the cover story. We got her all the way back to 2013. She's usually, and with AP, because they have like 1,800 medias that contributed to them, right? And so they'll all repost the story in the same picture with the same author, the same paragraph, at the same time worldwide. And you got some moron over there. This is a incredible scam. And Fukushima, there's nobody even lives there, so how can you write an article from Fukushima? And it's Mari Yamaguchi, for goodness sakes, one of the most demonic demons we've come across in 12 years. Workers, which is the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, were making final preparations. Workers, the homeless. As Associated Press journalists received a rare opportunity Friday to get a look at the key equipment and facilities for the release. Bear with me, I gotta poke that away too. There we go. Let me just talk about Mari Yamaguchi for a second. So Mari Yamaguchi, 2013, saying they had 1,000 tanks. Guess how many they got today? 1,000 tanks. Mari Yamaguchi, 2014, saying they got 1,200 tanks. Guess how many they got today? 1,000. Back to that story we were talking about. Japan's fishing industry, fears it will destroy the reputation of the country's seafood. This is the propaganda, though. It's not the fishing industry. It's just propaganda. Like, it actually happened. Did anybody bother telling Japan's fishermen this actually happened? Like, why are people so evil when it comes to nuclears? I just can't wrap my mind around it. Hong Kong announced it would ban seafood because they're playing the bad guy, right? To make it seem real. They got no ban on anything. Everything comes with a fake rubber stamp radiation slip, and they just give it to the population. Diluted, which is what they are, water will slowly be sent to the secondary pool before hitting a tunnel for gradual offshore releases over the span of decades. And because there's 2.2 grams, this is the official story. 1,000 tanks got 2.2 grams total. Just tritium. There's nothing else in the reactors anymore. The industry rewrote the laws of physics. Now it's just tritium. All part of the operational permit is granted to the plan by the nuclear safety inspectors, which were created post-Fukushima, I might add, and are just the industry's lapdogs on top of that. And then the World Health Organization, which is UN, IAEA is UN, UNSCLEAR is UN, IRPA is UN, and International Atomic Energy Agency, UN. So they all just back each other up. They're the same people. They all wear different pins. For drinking water, well, the World Health Organization, which is UN, don't have a right to impose, and legally they can't, but they bought off the players, politicians. They have to play with UN or they won't get a job as a politician. Causing 3 reactors to melt. As if first off, there was 4 reactors that melted. Reactor 4 had half a reactor core in it and 8 fuel pools. They said the water is collected. This is the official cover story, by the way, because Mari Yamaguchi. The water is collected, treated with filtering system, which is the Riva, right? Is the ELP system. The series system for cesium didn't work. The ELP system is the same thing. The Arriva system is the same. It didn't work, which was France's system. And the ELP system in 2014 didn't work. Stored in 1,000 tanks. So 2013, 2023, they still got 1,000 tanks. Thanks. Just let me talk about the Riva system, the ELP system, and the series system quickly. Is there quickly anymore? So 2014 in August, which is 3.5 years later, the system remained unused and kept out of operation for the Arriva, which is French is same as the Alps. The Alps system in 2014 had yet to function. The series system in 2013, and we never heard of it after. The plant has already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from the plethora of leaks from the reactor buildings that are no longer exist. And the series system. other radioactive material, other system design and remove. Other radioactive materials have been overwhelmed by the complexity and concentrations. And you're talking over 2 sieverts. This one is only talking about a sievert per hour. Just bear with me. That's the problem with the story. I'll go backwards. The China syndrome has cracked the Earth open, and coming in 2011, October, was 4.7 sieverts per hour coming out of the ground, 20% more than in June. This was steam, and there was lethal dose immediately. In August of 2011, it came out, there were 6 places at 10 sieverts per hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. There were 6 places where the steam was shooting out of the ground. The whole site would disappear in a plume of steam. You had to abandon the site. There is no filtration system. The tanks are empty. The tanks were built to manipulate you into thinking that they can control it. But obviously, I showed you so much earlier of legacy headlines that there should be no way to misinterpret that. Nuclear power is clean and safe, says the crazies. There's lots of them, right? They're fun. Incredible potential, providing clean, safe energy while emitting no greenhouse gases. Unfortunately, that's all it does is emit greenhouse gases. That's what global warming is. It's radioactive fallout. 80 years of it. Fukushima was a big pulse event. So this model is based on 19 days. But you got to realize you got a plume covering the planet, pulsing energy every second. The entire planet. It's equivalent if you had a snowstorm that after 20 or 40 days covers the whole planet, continuous snowfall, and it never melts and it never stops. Then you'd be pretty concerned, right? But Fukushima is very sneaky. Nuclear is very sneaky. You got 80 years of it hemorrhaging into the environment from all kinds, from the nuclear wars they had, which was 36,000 Hiroshima bombs worth, Nagasaki bombs worth of radioactive fallout. 36,000. And this is pulsing energy, so you can't perceive it. You can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. But it's pulsing energy, and you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, and they pulse energy each almost at the speed of light. When they hit each other, they change direction. That's known as a braking effect, and you call it X-rays. And so all the species are getting full body X-rays, all the humans and species. And this is why we're seeing this flash of illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and global warming worldwide. You can go all the way back to 2011 and you'll see how that happened from there on. Nuclear power plants produce zero emissions. They hemorrhage radiation non-stop into the environment. That's why they're surrounded by farms. Or climate change. Well, nuclear is climate change. 80 years of it, and now there's no way back. And we still got to hold the industry accountable. We still got to try. Unlike wind or solar power, which depends on weather, nuclear can provide constant. And it's such a disgusting argument. So they scuttle wind and solar's ability to have storage. And then he said, well, they can't provide power all the time because you're dependent on the wind. An example of that was last year, Canada closed 750 wind and solar farms in Ontario. And there was $4.5 billion sitting there for storage for renewables. So they closed all the renewables, 750 of them, and took the 4.5 billion and gave it to Bruce Nuclear Power, which is going to take the 4.5 billion and make storage. And nuclear doesn't need storage. But they didn't want renewables to succeed because then everybody would fight against nuclear. So they destroyed Canada's future, which is normal. That's the nuclear industry. And that's going on for a very long time. That's what they do. They're only good at one thing, is destroying all species. So again, they talk about infiltrating all the schools. Every Dutch train now runs on wind power. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Nuclear backpacks. U.S. and Russia terrified as the Wagners were close to acquiring Russia nukes. Apparently, Russia got backpack nukes. Forget about the nuclear suitcase. Now we got backpack nukes. And they couldn't get into the building with the backpack nukes. That's the official story, which I find unbelievable. This was a very highly trained military group, and there's a lot of them. They want to get in the building, they would have gotten in the building. And smashed the truck to the side of it and walked in there if they had to. That holds miniaturized nuclear charges. I never heard that one before, nuclear charges. Anything that can blow up with nuclear in it is a nuclear bomb. You got nuclear bombs that can be carried in backpacks. They're calling it charges, nuclear charges. So you can put it on a bridge and nuke the city too at the same time. Yeah, we got the bridge, and 3/4 of the city. They eventually could not lay their hands on the devices since they couldn't find a key to the door. Lucky us. However, could not get through the doors of the nuclear storage facility because the doors were closed. They were closed and they couldn't get in, Dana. So they went and had pizzas and they tried again somewhere else. They got nuclear tanks, they got all kinds of stuff, but they couldn't get keys to the door. Thank goodness is all I can say. I'll admit I felt stupid when I read that story. I felt like I almost gave up on humanity when I read that story. U.S. legacy radioactive contamination revealed in St. Louis, and this is Nuclear Engineer International. It was one of the most notorious scumbags in history, spilling the beans. So imagine what they're not telling you when I tell you what they're telling you. U.S. federal government and companies responsible for nuclear weapons production and atomic waste storage sites in St. Louis in the mid-20th century were aware of health risk and spills, improperly stored contaminants and other problems, but ignored them. No, they wouldn't do that. They love us too much. There's no way. I refuse to believe they would do that. They love us way too much. According to the documents, which is Scumbag Associate Press and Nuclear Engineering International is breaking the story, folks. Said it received support from the Walton Family Foundation for coverage of water environmental policies. Yeah, well, these foundations get taken over by this machine, and this is how they spend the money, see? It was probably a good foundation at one time, but then the industry took it over. The Associated Press examined hundreds of pages of internal memos and found nonchalant indifference to the risk of material used in developing nuclear weapons after the World War. Don Chapman, the activist group Just Moms, STL, was pushing for cleanup federal buyouts in the area, said the region saved our country with his work on nuclear program, but paid a terrible cost. Japan wasn't going to invade America. Paid a terrible cost. We are a national sacrifice zone. In 1942, they began processing uranium near downtown St. Louis. In 1946, the government bought the land near the airport and began trucking nuclear waste from the facility. Imagine if they were trying to do that today. So if you take that path to the airport they're talking about, and you live on that path, get out of there right now. They stored barrels of K-65 radioactive residue at the St. Louis airport in deteriorating steel drums. In 1949, a memo shows the company was aware the broken drums could result in runoff pollution to the nearby Coldwater Creek, but it determined the threat to workers from attempting to move the drums would be worse. It's disgusting, eh? In 1957, the Atomic Energy Commission, which was banned later because it was so evil, opened a plant in Weldon Spring and moved its uranium processing there. That other company, I can't pronounce whatever the hell that is, Malik Rock or something. Radioactive waste contaminated the area, including a large quarry that eventually became a Superfund cleanup site in 1987, and the rest of Wellington Springs site was added 2 years later. Why did you wait 2 years? In 1966, the Atomic Energy Commission demolished and buried buildings in St. Louis Airport site, which means it's unbelievably contaminated today. Continental Mining and Milling Company moved the waste to nearby Bridgeton, piling it in a heap. The Atomic Energy Commission said that at the time, the radioactive barrels laid outside the fence. We've heard these stories so many times. Storage was so haphazard that even the path to the site was contaminated by trucks that spread the waste on their hauls from 1966 to 69. Makes me angry whenever I see this stuff. At this site, the uranium processor Cotter Corp dried the waste and shipped it to a facility in Colorado. Dried the waste. And so what did they do with all the vapors? Disgusting, despicable scum. These vapors are lethal doses we're talking about. By the liter. The site contained contamination for decades. In 1973, Cotter Corp took hazardous leached barium sulfite from the site and illegally dumped it in the West Lake landfill, also in Bridgeton. Both the St. Louis Airport and Bridgeton sites are bordered by Coldwater Creek, which runs through the heart of what's now busy suburban neighborhoods, and tons of waste flowed into Coldwater Creek, contaminating the often flooding waterways and adjacent gardens for 14 miles. Oh, it goes a lot further than that. State and federal investigators determined. In the late 70s, the Non-Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which replaced the disgusting Atomic Energy Commission, flew a helicopter over Waste Lake landfill. It used gamma readings, forget about alphas, betas, and neutrons, X-rays, in an attempt to determine what part of the landfill were contaminated with the radioactive waste from Cotter Corp had dumped there. Tests correctly identified at least 2 contaminated areas, but missed huge areas of the landfill. Nobody's surprised anymore. Despite warning from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources and activists that the contamination was likely more widespread, The non-regulatory commission conclusion stood for more than 40 years. So they created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and got rid of the Atomic Energy Commission. But the people that work for them are the Nuclear Regulatory Commissions, the same people. Right, there's in United Kingdom, when Windscale melted down, they went out and used buses to steal people from the back rows of theaters, for instance. And so when that came out, they changed the name of the company to its current name, Sellafield. They didn't get nuclear academics, nuclear universities, nuclear corporations to do it. They stole people from the back of theaters, because back in those days, the poor people sat in the back of the theaters. The government cleanup of Walden Spring is complete, it claims. You can't clean up once you dump it into the ground, for God's sakes. And the site will require monitoring perpetuity. Rather than remove the waste, the government built a huge mound covered in rocks to serve as a permanent disposal cell for much of the waste. The government, which is the industry itself, said the site is safe, but local residents remain concerned. I'm very concerned for these victims. Federal officials plan to remove some of the waste at Waste Lake landfill and cap the rest. Clean up Coldwater Creek is underway. It will continue to 2038. He spent over $1 billion, or stole over $1 billion so far. The Atomic Energy Commission was abolished in the 1970s in part because of public criticism of its handling of nuclear safety. They knew everybody would give up eventually. And the degenerate Department of Energy is now responsible for overseeing the situation. Denise's Brock's father worked for years at Mallet Rock. After he died of cancer in 1978, she lobbied for compensation. In 2003, founded United Nuclear Weapons Workers. Her actions led the government to begin offering up to $400,000 to those who worked at the nuclear disease factories across the country and became ill. And over the past 2 decades, the government has paid out $23 billion. Because it's like a banana, see? However, while nuclear workers had direct exposure, many people who live near the contaminated sites were not told about the risk for decades. Chapman and Karen Nickel were so concerned about cancer and other unusual illnesses in their St. Louis neighborhoods, they formed Just Moms, STL. There's so many examples of that, right? And we're just talking North America. Imagine India and Pakistan and Russia and China and places like these. You know, Taiwan had moved all the natives to Orchard Island, quite far away from the mainland, or from the main colony of Taiwan. And they decided they wanted to put their nuclear waste over there, but they knew the natives wouldn't let them do it. So they went over to the natives and he said, we'd like to build a canning factory for tuna and salmon. And the natives were like, sure, that's great. We'll get lots of... and they were going to throw them money every month for the rest of their lives. And they should have ran the minute they heard that one. A stipend, right? And they built a nuclear waste facility and called it a tuna canning factory. And when the natives found out what happened, it was too late. Oh, too late, you signed the paper. Tough luck. Here's your $100 a month. Have a nice life, scumbag. Those exposed daily to the creek in the 2000s when cleanup began could have a small increased risk of lung cancer. There's 1,800 diseases, you heartless, soulless wonder. The earliest known public reference to Coldwater Creek pollution came in 1981, when the EPA, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, was advising residents to avoid Coldwater Creek entirely. And people still live there today, 42 years later. And because it's a creek, it evaporates constantly into the surrounding areas on hot days, right? A federal study found elevated rates of breast, colon, prostate, kidney, bladder cancers, as well as leukemias. Childhood brain and nervous system cancer rates were also higher. And families who lived near Coldwater Creek were never warned of the radioactive waste. And details about the classified nuclear program in St. Louis were largely kept secret from the public. However, newly discovered documents are now being reviewed by collaboration of news organizations. The Missouri Independence, Mudrock, AP have spent months combing through thousands of pages of government records obtained through the Freedom of Information Act and interviewing dozens of people who live near the contaminated sites, health and radiation experts. Like, a radiation expert is someone who's going to cut your throat. All told, the documents spanned 75 years of endless releases into the communities. 75 years. So in 1976, they were getting 8.8 millisieverts. 8.8 millisieverts is not how you would count this radiation. You would count it in physical atoms, becquerels, atomic decays a second. And the readings are 220 times higher than the EPA's limit for drinking water pathway. But see, you don't measure like stuff in your food by millisieverts or microsieverts. You measure it in atoms. They can't help but be scumbags. It just comes natural to them, right? Russia is gripped by nuclear panic after a major incident declared at the uranium enrichment plant. The plant enriched uranium for use in nuclear power stations and is the largest of its kind in the world. So most countries are getting their high-assay uranium fuel from Russia. They're still doing it, right? They banned the commodities that you use and it caused artificial inflation. But they didn't ban uranium, and Russia didn't tell them to get lost. You know, they're not working together at all. Russia was put on nuclear alert on Friday after a cylinder containing depleted uranium ruptured, killing one person. Depleted uranium cylinder. The incident happened at the Ural electrochemical plant that is owned by the state institution Rosatom, which is, we've covered them so many times. Their legacy is hideous. The plant enriches uranium for use in nuclear power stations, is the largest of its kind in the world, and more than 100 employees of the plants were ordered to report to the hospital for medical checkups. Well, Russia's not known for taking care of their own. If they're doing that, there's a reason. Why don't you show us a picture of Chernobyl? The added depleted form of compound was less radioactive than natural uranium. Well, if it was, you wouldn't be putting it in a special container, would you? A cylinder, a pressurized cylinder. They don't lie very often, just only when they open up their mouth. Russia has suffered a number of major nuclear accidents in the past, and authorities have attempted to conceal it from the public. They successfully conceal it, and led many in Russia disbelieved officials when it comes to announcements. In 1957, a waste tank exploded at the Mayak nuclear facility in Russia. 10 years later, and he said it released 2 million curies. 2 million curies. Let's do the math on that because we're almost through. I got some videos we're going to play in a few moments. 2 million curies, you say? So 2 million divided by 140 curies is each 140 is a gram. So divide that by 29 to get, which is an ounce. Then divide that by 16 to get pounds. And so 30 pounds. That's what they're talking about. Which is a lot, right? But these tanks were, this is the mixed oxide fuel we're talking about. This stuff has already gone through a chain reaction. So it's 2 million curies or something like that. Lying, it comes natural to them, right? They're perpetual liars. In 57, that waste tank exploded. At least 22 villages relocated or something, or exposed 22 villages to radiation. It's considered the third worst nuclear accident behind Fukushima and Chernobyl. Well, Santa Susana, which is equal to 460 Three Miles Islands. And 3 Mile Island, the cover-up on that was really stunning. Where they claimed 2 million people got the radiation dose, yeah, but it was equal to watching color television for an extra year, was the official story. Which those people, if they're still alive, should be prosecuted for. Around 270,000 people were still living on the contaminated land, and within 2 years of the accident, only 11,000 were evacuated. They evacuated nobody from Santa Susana area, allowed 500,000 people to build new homes within a couple of miles of the ongoing meltdowns on top of that. Soviet officials tried to claim that the radiation situation near the Chernobyl plant was stabilized after Chernobyl in '86, which is true. The rumors are a little exaggerated, said the Deputy Minister of Civil Aviation. Rumors are a little exaggerated. It's not a catastrophe, it's an accident. They've done studies after Chernobyl on the sex ratio of males and females in Europe, because you figured everybody got polluted there. They actually closed 9,000 farms, 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. Nearly a dozen countries rely on Russia for their disease factory fuels. Robotic arm for Fukushima fuel debris removal unveiled. So it sounds like, wow, they're going to remove the fuel with this robotic arm. Once you use the arm a single time, you can never go near it again. Anything with electronics will break right away, by the way. A robot arm will be used to remove the melted fuel from the number 2 reactor. So when you read the first paragraph, that's most people, right? But as you read a little bit further, they're going to remove 2.2 grams of fuel debris as a test basis this fiscal year, and then they're going to make adjustments. The arm can be extended 22 meters, and there's only a 30 millimeter margin to prevent it from hitting the wall. Oh, this is another one, like a crushed pack of sugar. The fable of that, right? First off, rule number 1 when it comes to nuclear, don't believe anything they tell you. Nothing. Every story is going to be full of propaganda and lies. There's a difference too, by the way. Postponed plans for Kilifi nuclear power plant in Kenya. Kenya is considering building a nuclear disease factory, but wind and solar and geothermal are abundant. Geothermal is perfect down there, and much cheaper than disease factories. This is a video from today. So I got the differential support bushing. I went down and had it removed at a backyard mechanic down here. And I paid him to press it out and put in the new one. I brought it home and installed it. I got rid of most of the problem, but we still got one problem. When I go over the edges, it feels like I have to pull over and come to a complete stop because the front drive shaft, I'm assuming it is stretched out or something. So I must have damaged it, and I'm going to take it off. I'm going to take the front drive shaft off tomorrow morning and see if I can drive the truck, because a lot of the blogs on this were saying you can't drive the truck without the front because they're in perpetual four-wheel drive, right? But you're in four-wheel drive high, according to other blogs, and so there were people saying they've been driving around for almost a month waiting for parts to come in by removing that front shaft. And so the front shaft CV joint can be replaced. And so I'm going to take that off tomorrow morning. I want to put the boat in the water tomorrow and get back out on the bird colonies. And anyway, we got that out. We got that reinstalled. That was a disaster trying to get it off. And because I put it up on the ramps, right, the front ramps, and that caused the pressure. And so once I committed to it, I just had to pound at it with the maul to get it to come out, and then getting it back. It went back in pretty easy compared to coming out. I also had the fuel filter show up for the boat, and so I changed that out. That's the new one is the top one. The bottom one is the old one. What am I doing here? So that's the old one in my hand, and that's the new one is installed. And so that's a big deal. Those things are brutally expensive, eh? And I got two of them because I didn't want two of them, but I got two of them ordered, and whatever. It won't hurt to keep it. And so we got over half, we got the harsh, whatever that was, fixed. So that's cool. And I still got a problem though, which is that front CV joint that connects. That you can buy that on its own, or you can buy the whole shaft with it attached to it, which is cheaper, but takes longer for it to show up. So I'm going to take that off tomorrow, take the truck for a drive. I want to put the boat in the water again tomorrow and get out on the bird colonies, because we have had a couple of days of heavy weather. I wanted to see if the 4% that survival rate that we got going on in 2 bird colonies is still alive, or how decimated they are. We need to keep checking that. And we want to see if there's any migratory birds. We know they're not going to show up. They didn't show up the last couple of years. They ain't going to show up now. They've been doing it for millions of generations. They don't just randomly disappear. If they did, if they go somewhere else, it would be big news, right? 46 million birds showing up in your country would make the news, you know what I mean? Because this is the biggest migratory route on the entire planet. Which brings us back to the poll. And was the creation of the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the IAEA, aka UN, a fatal mistake for Earth's species and humans? For Earth's 8 million species and humans, yes it was. You got 45 votes. Somebody said no. That must have been an accident. Obviously, the answer is yes. Robots that can't robot. That's hilarious. James Lucid donated almost 200 at the last show for a Thursday night. And Stephen Young donated 50 yesterday. Thank you. And I ordered in the extra. I got ordered in over 600 feet of wire because I got to rewire the boat. Because you got to get different, you got to get different thicknesses, right? I got a good deal on all of it. And I got the switches, because you can get like 50 switches for $15, and what they do are levers. And so instead of having to solder everything, you got 2 switches on each one. So you put your cable in, you hit your lever, lock it down, put your cable in the other side, and that's your connection. So it's brilliant, really, right? But I also got a whole bunch of those solder filaments. They got solder, and then they got shrink wrap on each side. And so put your cables in there, you hit it with the heat gun, it melts the solder, and it shrink wraps it at the same time. So because there's a lot of applications like outdoor stuff, I'll do that too, obviously, right? But anything that's in under the steering console, well, because the wiring on that is like 8 years old or something. I've done all that myself. Yeah, thanks Dana, Nasana, and everybody. Albert, I'm sorry about your cat, Albert. Or Richard, I'm sorry. James Lucid, hi James, again thank you. Kevin Blanche, hi Kevin, hugs for you, my friend. Kevin's relentless, he never slows down. P. High, John Shiflett, Vast Thinker. Good night, everybody. I'm doing a shout out, am I? Don Vincent, Angels Place. Yeah, let me do a quick shout out while we're here. I was super happy to get rid of most of the problem in the truck today. That was a big deal for me. And I'm really happy we got the boat filter, the fuel filter for the boat, because that's a really old filter. And John Curtis, the idea is to take it off tomorrow, go over that hump and see if it does it to me again. We got to get the boat in the water. We got to get out and check the colonies, see? I don't know what to say. I'm doing everything I can do, right? But we got so much on our plate. Sandra Wolf Churchill, hi everyone. Just keep banging away at it until we figures it out, I guess. Nobby. Maritime Slave. And I've seen Collector earlier. I'm not sure if I've seen Stephen Young or not, but hi, Stephen. It's hard for Stephen to type, eh? He used to send all kinds of messages off to Congress and senators and Parliament about Fukushima, and then he would CC me the replies he got from them. They were usually just chain mail, right? But at least he was, at least he'd done it. He got it in their face. Another is CG. Port Angeles 2. Hi, everybody. Thanks for have a great night. Almost through it. The older Timothy Martin. Yeah, Pacific is dead. That's right. And I probably got everybody. Over the hump. Hey, that's great to hear. And Dana Nasana, of course. Hi, Dana. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. I'll be on the ocean tomorrow. If I'm on the ocean tomorrow, I'm going to be shooting a video of that colony. I got everything set up to do it. If the weather holds out like it looks like, I'll get out there and do it. I'll be uploading that because we need that footage, and that'll be in hopefully 4K is what I'm going to be shooting for this time. And that way you can see exactly what the test area is, right? Okay. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. If I'm on the ocean tomorrow, I'll do a short live, and then I'll shoot a high quality video, and then I'll take pictures, whatever the left of the battery. And I should bring that charger with me tomorrow when I'm full, so I can get extra couple hundred pictures out of it while I'm out there. We'll see everybody tomorrow night for updates. Take care, everybody. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far now.